Hello and welcome back to yet another Rivet tutorial. Today we will be looking at how to handle chat history in Rivet, as this is not a standard feature, and if you're just using a chat node there is no history. You have to do it yourself. First of all, I want to apologize quickly. I'm traveling, so there's no camera. Also, my microphone is not very good. It probably picks up the clicking of the mouse and everything, and last but not least, I'm also I'm having a bit of a cold, so I think my voice is not ideal, and maybe I'm maybe coughing a bit or something. So sorry for that. But nonetheless, let's go on. We will be looking at two examples today because there's basically two main cases. One is a session history, and I define a session now as a run of the project or a graph. So while we are running a graph, we are remembering values. And after we are aborting or we are finishing the graph and we are running it again, we forgot everything. This is, I think, the most common use case that most people will need, and it's fairly simple to do. And there's a much more complex but also interesting use case about having a permanent or persistent history, so that even if you abort or stop the graph or finish the graph and then run it again, you will still continue where you left off. All the conversation history is still there. So a bit like the chats you can create with ChatGPT, where you can just go back any time into one of the chats you already have, and you can just type and continue, and everything is as it was before. Okay, so let's take a look at the first one here, the session history. Basically, we are using the loop controller here. There might be ways to do all this without a loop controller, and maybe I do another video about it, but for now, for this case, we are using it. And there's two values that we need to be passing around. One, let's maybe start with data 2, is the most obvious one. We need our history, our chat history, to be passed around. And for the first iteration, our default input down here is just our system prompt. So I have a pretty random system prompt here. Your Mandy, help, phone friendly helper, and so on. And this is going to the default port. And then for our consecutive runs, we have this input here, and this is the all messages output from the chat. This is a very simple way to retrieve all messages so far, including the system prompt, and feed them back. Please also note, we are treating the history as one big object because it's a bit easier. We could separate out the system prompt and send it separately in here, but there's not really much of a benefit. Or technically, there is no different if we feed it all here or if we feed it separately into this part. This is just as it makes it a bit easier to handle for some people, but basically there is not even a distinction of those two values in the API of ChatGPT, and also underlying LLMs don't really care. They only need to know that there's some system message at the beginning of the chat history, and this is what we are also doing here. Okay, now the second input we are having is our text for the user input. Let me quickly run it to show you basically this here. And for the first iteration, we don't have any reply from the AI yet, so we need to put something there. I mean, I just wrote enter your message in the input here, and this is our default value that's being used in the first run. And then, of course, once we are going into a second iteration, we actually have a response of the AI, and we're using this response field, which is in this case, it's good. It's not returning a prompt, but just the text, just the raw answer as a string. So we can directly feed it back and use it here. In some other cases, actually, it's a bit annoying that it's not a prompt, but in this case, it's helpful. Okay, so let's go back to our execution and just send some messages around. Let's say hello. And let's ask the AI how it is today. Okay, so that should be enough. Let's abort it. And now we can take a look how this worked. So for the first iteration, let's actually go back here. For the first iteration, we first went into the user input, and yes, as we saw, enter your message was the text shown, and I answer with hello. Now we are putting this into a user input prompt, a user prompt, sorry. You can see here the user wrote hello. And now we need to assemble our prompt that we will set into the chat. And in this case, it's pretty simple. We are taking the default value of input 2, or the first value input, so the system message and then our message. And both those together are going to the prompt. And this is why the AI wrote us, hey there, how can I assist you today? And now for the second execution. We are, first of all, here the question, or the input for the user input was the last response of the AI. We can see is here, hey there, how can I assist you today? And I wrote, how are you doing? Then again, we are creating a new user input. And now our data 2 input, or output, was the whole messages, were all the messages from before. That's actually not correct what it's showing here. We need to go down back. Was this. And in this assemble prompt here, we are putting it together. We are putting first the old messages in front. So in this message 1 input here, these 3 messages here have been the messages from the previous run. And now we are adding our new user message, feeding this back to the chat and so on, so on. Our history is growing, and this works well. Okay, so if you're only needing this solution, then yeah, basically that's all there is to it. It's not too complex. Yeah, that works fine. Okay, let's go to the more complex example. But I try to split it up a lot so that it is not that scary. So basically this is our graph now. As you can see, some parts look very much the same, but there are some extensions. Basically the subgraph here is new. We are not just inputting those values as raw values. And there is also some logging part below here, which is doing some stuff. We will get into that. First thing I want to show you is, yeah, basically there is this data studio here, and I previously already ran this, so let's delete this. So if you would not have run this persistent or permanent chat history graph yet, you wouldn't see nothing here. And usually you could also manually create data sets here and so on. But now, for now, it's nothing here. And yeah, basically those data sets here are like small databases. We will see it in a second. And maybe let's just run this one. And as we can already see here now it automatically creates us a data set for our chat history. And it already created logged or saved our first message, which is a system message. So it's type system. And the message is here, you're Mandy, helpful and friendly helper. So this is the same as before. And now let's just use this for now. Let's say hello again. The AI is answering us. Let's go one more round. And let's remember, this is our last message. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Let's abort the graph. Let's run this again. And we can see we are just continuing where we left off. Last response from the AI was, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. And now we can immediately jump back into our conversation. And we can also see this here. Our data set now has all the additional messages. It has my hello, the response of the AI, my next message, and the last message. So this is now a permanent data storage. Where is it saved? Not in this project file itself, but Rivet is creating an additional file. So there's now, if you would look into the folder of your project, there's not just a .rivet -project file, there's also a .rivet data file. So if you want to share data with someone and the project, you need to copy both files around. And also, if you want to manipulate the data here, you can, for example, just delete the whole data set. You can delete separate messages. You can insert data. You can also play around in here. Oops. Sorry. Why is it gone now? Huh. This is a bit odd. I hope this is let's see, is this a display bug or is it? No, I don't know. I deleted it on accident, but that's fine. Okay, first of all, I also created a subgraph which can do the clearing of the message history. So now we have the one message in here again because I was running it, but we can also just run this one here, abort first. And now we have no messages in here. So This is, I created a small graph that helps you to clear everything out. So you could also connect this as a subgraph at some point in your project. Yeah, if you want to get rid of the history or to manually run it. If you don't want to go to the data studio each time, you can just run this graph. Okay, but so much about that. Let's take a look at this graph here and let's check it out. Let's do one run and let's not really do anything yet. We just want to create some data for now we can look at. And basically, lots of things are the same. Let's first look at that. So we still have our inputs here, system prompt and our default user input. And we have our chat loop here. The chat loop is pretty much, still has the same inputs. There is the last response and the chat history. And then there's only something also connect to the continue port. This is more or less a workaround because the loop controller is behaving a bit funny. I will explain it when we come to it. But besides that, this is all the same. As you can see here, we have the user input, we are putting this into the prompt, we are assembling our prompt, this is going to the chat. And now all this is going back into our input for data 1 and our input for data 2. Same game. Nothing inside this loop has changed in any way. What has changed is this part here. So we are putting our default user instructions into a subgraph, and what we are expecting as an output is the chat history and the last response. Let's take a look. So this graph here is handling all that, and it is also calling to smaller subgraphs as well, and actually a third one down here. But it's not that complicated. So let's just look here. First of all, what we are doing is we are creating our data set, so this table here. Because if we don't have a table, we will get errors if we try to get data from the table, if we try to write to the table, and so on. So this is something we always need to do first. And as you can see, this is also happening before we are trying to get messages. So this is the second one is trying to get messages, and there's a connection from this output to this input. Let's take a small look into this table here, into the subgraph here. It's super simple. We are creating a data set which has chat history as data set ID and name. You could separate those values and give ID some random number or whatever you like, but you can also name it the same. And then we actually don't care the slightest about the output, but we are creating a fake output called go, just so that we can know when the subgraph finished running. And now we can use this as an input for, we can use this as an input for our get messages subgraph. So let's go there. So basically once this is being triggered, this one is being run after the data set was created. And also one more note, the good thing about this subgraph is if the data set is already existing, it just does nothing. It just runs successfully and nothing changes. So we don't need any complicated if the data set already exists and do not create it and stuff like that. We can just create it all the time and nothing bad is happening. So now we are trying to read the messages. And again, this input here is just a fake input, which we just use to know that only if this gets a value, this subgraph is being run. So we are not even connecting the output because we don't care. What we are doing here is also this part here is fairly simple. We are asking for the contents of the chat history. So we actually make, we could have selected our chat history here, but that doesn't work if you don't have it created yet. So we need to make this dynamic by adding this checkbox, and we are inserting the name of it for the ID actually of it here. And then we are reading the data set and handling it. And at the moment we don't have a history, so there's nothing to see here. We have 0 output. So let's go back for the moment here to the subgraph. And now this subgraph is doing 3 different things. First of all, it checks if the history already exists, which is actually this one here. So we are just doing, as you can see at the moment, it's empty, so it's returning nothing, this get messages function. So we're putting this into an if here. And at the moment, this is false. And if it's false, we are just using our system instructions. We are putting this into a system prompt. as you can see here, and then we are assembling a prompt. I mean, now it's an array of prompts, but it's just one prompt. So we just bring it to the same format as a full chat history would be. And we are putting this in this if else. So if this if condition is false, if there's no history, we are returning the system prompt. And that is what we are doing here. And now this goes to the output of the chat history. So for now, we don't have a history, so we are returning the system prompt. And then we kind of do the same for our last response or default user input check. So we are having an if. Again, if there is a history, then we would get the last message from the back of the array, and we would extract only the message, because for the user input we don't need to know what type it is and all this additional information. We just need the message. And if there is a history, we would use this value. If there is no history, we are using the default user input here. And for now, that means we were also just returning our enter your message text. So this way we now have a check that checks if there's history, and yes, if yes, return it, or just return our two default values, same as before. And then last but not least, we need to start writing information or every single message to the data set. And this is being done here. Of course, so basically, as you can see here, we have been logging the system prompt. And of course, we only want to log this one single time. So again, we have an if check for the chat history. And if it exists, we are actually doing nothing because we already logged it previously. But if it doesn't exist, we are putting our system prompt in as a value, and the false port is connecting to our subgraph, which is appending messages to the data set. Let's take a short look into that. So now we are getting this system prompt in here. We are changing it to a JSON object. We cannot really see it here, but this is now a JSON string. So basically like a JSON stringify format in like JavaScript or something like that. And we are adding that into the data for our, for appending it to a data set into the data port. And again, we are referencing the dataset ID here. We also need to make the check mark here. And now it's being saved as a dataset. And as we can see, we didn't give it an ID, so it was automatically assigned one. And we have the data here. And as I said, this is stringified JSON. We can see it here now. So it's usually a good idea to stringify information that you want to be safe, because otherwise the Data Studio has some behaviors, like it will automatically put arrays of data into separate columns and so on, and you may not want it. And also in this case, we don't need it. We can just save all the information in one separate column. Okay. Now we are basically nearly finished looking at this. Let's just clear it one more time. So now our history is empty. Let's run 102. Let's run it a bit to have some history. So hello, and ask a question. Okay, this is good enough. And now let's take one more look into the subgraph. Now we had a chat history. So basically this if condition. Okay, sorry, we need to run one more time now to see this. Okay, now for our second run, we have a chat history. So basically this get messages is now returning our chat history. You can see it here. And let's go 1 second into it. Now we also were able we were loading the data set. We got values, as you can see here. We got like in data with an array in, and then there's our JSON stringified data for the messages in here. And to return extract the proper data and return it as a chat message object, I used a code node in this case because it was a bit hard to do it with the inbuilt nodes. Took me like 4 or 5 nodes and was pretty confusing. So in this case, we are using a code node once, which is just extracting which is finding the data key and then also the first entry in the array in there, and it's returning this as a chat message, array of chat messages. So this is actually what you get if you are assembling a prompt. Then you're getting, use this node, then you're getting an array of chat messages. And as we can already see here, the Rivet also can clearly see the data type now as it's adding the colors and all the formatting. So this works well, and we are putting out in the proper format so that it can be used. And now the same down here for fetching the last response. We can actually, this is actually true now because we have a chat history. So we are popping the last message from the back, which is this here, type assistant, message, I'm doing great. And now we are getting just the message of it, I'm doing great, thanks for asking, and returning this as the last response, and all of this is running fine. So there's only one last thing to look at now. And for this one, I will do another run. I will just ask random question because I don't really care, but I just want some data in the loop. Okay. Now we have a full run and we have data in here. There is this logging part down below here. And what this is doing is very simple. When we are creating the user prompt, we also want this in our data set. So we are also connecting the output of the user prompt to our append message subgraph. And as we can see here, this ends up in creating a new message. And then we also need to log the response of the AI. And as I said previously, this is not automatically creating a proper prompt. This is just returning text. So we also need to send this into a prompt from type assistant. And then we also need to log that. And now last but not least, there's this final issue here. I did not connect this at first. So basically it looked like this. And now this was off, not working. Why was it not working? Because the loop controller already went into the next iteration and somehow canceled this because it did not know that this is kind of a dead end. You see this runs from here to here to here, or no, from here, and then it just stops. And the loop controller does not like dead ends. You need to reconnect all your graphs somehow. So again, we are using like some fake output like continue because we don't even care about the value. And in this case, we're just using the continue port because this is not really doing anything unless we put a false value in there, and then it would cause the break condition here. But we can just put something in, and this fixes this issue. Yeah, and basically that's all of it. As always, you will find the files for this in the description. I hope this was helpful. Please give me a feedback and also tell me what you like to see in the future. And maybe you have simpler solutions for this. This would also be very interesting, and I'd like to do another video about this. So thank you very much and stay tuned.